Now, looking back in the history of pro wrestling, there have been a lot of great factions over the years, like Evolution, the Four Horsemen, and the NWO, just to name a few. But today we're going to take a trip down memory lane all the way back to 2009, where one of the most underrated groups of the modern era was born, and that was the Straight Edge Society. Now, before we talk about the group itself, we need to talk about the leader, CM Punk, who had just recently turned heel by embracing his real-life straight edge personality on screen. He would constantly tell the crowd that he was better than them because he wouldn't smoke or do drugs, which in his eyes made him purer than everyone else. However, it wouldn't be enough for CM Punk just to go to every city in the world and spread his message. He needed to back up his words that his movement was something that was serious. The Straight Edge Society was officially formed on November 27, 2009, when CM Punk came to the ring with Luke Gallows, who we only had known as the former Festus. Apparently, the reason why Festus looked like he had been dropped on his head from birth and never fully recovered was because he was a victim of drug abuse and neglect, which makes sense because, he looked like this before. This also gave Luke Gallows a great opportunity in the WWE to learn from one of the best after he had worked so hard just to get into WWE, being humiliated on Tough Enough when his shorts fell to his ankle, exposing his penis while he was doing push-ups. Yes, that really happened. But not just that, but being sidelined with the awful Festus gimmick, this was the opportunity to make Luke Gallows into a name. Gallows would essentially be the muscles of the group, attacking anyone that dared to defy Punk. And over the coming weeks on SmackDown, CM Punk would pick out random people from the crowd, and he would shave their heads bald. The reason why Punk would do this was to symbolize that by shaving your hair, you would be shaving off the impurity of alcohol and drugs in your body, and be starting a new straight edge life. On the January 22nd, 2010 edition of Raw, Punk would go out with Luke Gallows, claiming that he was going to save someone that night from the impurity of alcohol and drugs, when a crazed woman jumped the guardrail, begging and pleading for Punk to save her. This woman was Serena Deeb. Serena had worked all over the US, especially with her work in Shimmer, getting her noticed when she eventually went to FCW and OVW to train for her eventual shot in the WWE. And she would end up shaving her head that night and officially joining the Straight Edge Society from then on. The Royal Rumble itself was quickly coming upon us, and CM Punk was trying to recapture the World Heavyweight title. And him winning the Royal Rumble would be the perfect way to get back into that title picture by being in the main event of WrestleMania. At the Royal Rumble, Punk would come in at number 3, which isn't the best spot to come in at all, but hey, people have won the Royal Rumble from the number 1 and the number 2 spot before, so it was still very much possible that Punk could win. Punk would quickly eliminate Dolph Ziggler and Evan Bourne, who had drawn number 1 and number 2. What would come next would be known as the Sermon on the Mount. As Punk would eliminate people left and right, he would grab a mic and say that he would win the Royal Rumble, and that unfortunately that not everyone could be saved with the straight edge lifestyle. He would eliminate Evan Bourne, Dolph Ziggler, JTG before the Great Khali would come out. Punk, of course, would try to convert Khali, but of course, Khali didn't want none of that smoke, and would chop Punk before getting eliminated by Beth Phoenix because he was just too goddamn horny. Also, in the Royal Rumble, Punk would be proven to be one of the first WWE wrestlers in the modern era to believe in intergender wrestling. He would wrestle Beth for a minute before hitting her with the GTS, which in the process gave him massive heat before eliminating her. He would try to save Zack Ryder before attacking him with the microphone and eliminating him, but the next entrant would be too much for Punk to handle as Triple H would come out. Triple H proceeded to come out, beat him up, and eliminate him from the Royal Rumble. Now, I wonder why Punk hated working with Triple H. Is it because that Triple H would always put himself over? And this is a keen example of it? Look, all joking aside, Punk had a great performance in the Royal Rumble with just a short amount of time. Punk would eventually go back to shaving people's heads and spreading his straight edge message. At one point, he even tried to convert Triple H to the group, which of course failed. To which Triple H would question Punk why he didn't have to shave his head off, but his followers did. And the answer that Punk gave was that he wouldn't shave off his hair because of the fact that no foreign substance or chemicals like drugs or alcohol have touched his hair, so in his own eyes, his hair was pure. I will say this, it does make sense, and Punk, up until this point, had been doing a very great job portraying the cowardly cult leader that doesn't practice what he preaches. After failing to win the Royal Rumble, CM Punk would get another shot at the World Heavyweight title by being in the 2010 Elimination Chamber match, but he was eliminated by Rey Mysterio. Punk, however, would not let this loss get him down because he had another opportunity to be part of WrestleMania 26, which included the Money in the Bank ladder match. And you know, the match that he had won 2 times before, and maybe, just maybe, he would be able to cash it in the night of WrestleMania. And all he had to do was beat Shelton Benjamin, which seemed like an easy enough task since Punk had Gallows to help him out. But once again, Rey Mysterio would cost him the chance for world title greatness. And at this point, Mysterio had all of Punk's undivided attention. What followed was one of the best promos that Punk would ever do in the company, when Rey Mysterio would bring out his family to celebrate his daughter's birthday, and Rey begins to sing Happy Birthday when CM Punk would come out to interrupt Rey Mysterio with his own rendition of Happy Birthday. However, Punk didn't just show up to sing and celebrate Aaliyah's birthday. Punk had one thing on his mind, and that was to get revenge on Rey Mysterio on the grandest stage of them all at WrestleMania. At first, Mysterio was very much against Punk challenging him at this very moment in time, and Punk would not take no for an answer. So CM Punk would call Rey Mysterio a coward. He dropped down to his knees so that he could quote-unquote be on Rey's level. He said his son was more of a man than Mysterio would ever be, before topping it all off with a nice slap across the face, before doing one of the most creepiest renditions of Happy Birthday ever known to man. The two would meet at WrestleMania 26, and in the build-up, the stakes were set high as a stipulation was added that if Rey Mysterio lost, he would have to join the Straight Edge Society. And Rey himself was fighting for the honor of his family. The two would go on to have a great match at WrestleMania, with Mysterio picking up the win. But the feud between the two was not over, as they would have a rematch at the next pay-per-view, Extreme Rules. But this time, Punk's pure hair was on the line, for if he lost, he would have to get it shaved bald. However, unbeknownst to Mysterio, Punk had an ace up his sleeve in the form of a mysterious hooded man that interfered in the match to help CM Punk win and save his glorious and pure hair. One more match between Mysterio and Punk with the same stipulations as before would end up happening. However, this time, the Masked Man and Luke Gallows wouldn't be enough to save CM Punk, as with the help of Kane, Rey Mysterio was able to pick up the win, and finally, he was able to shave off Punk's quote-unquote pure hair. On the following episode of SmackDown, CM Punk would come out with a towel on his head, ready to show the world how he looked now that his hair was gone. He took his hand and removed the towel, revealing his brand new look. And of course, you weren't going to see him bald straight away, and in a booking masterstroke, they gave him a great mask that would hide his true face. However, at this point, the cracks were beginning to show within the Straight Edge Society, when Kane, who was on a mission to find out who attacked The Undertaker a few weeks prior, led him to accuse CM Punk at one point. But Serena would be the one to save Punk from getting the shit beat out of him by Kane when she showed footage of Serena going out into a bar on the night in question and Punk intervening to save her from alcohol that night. Punk did not like the fact that Serena was showing weakness by almost going back to the form of alcohol. But of course, Serena was forgiven and welcomed back into the Straight Edge Society. But no doubt this had an effect on CM Punk and his trust for the group. Punk would then find himself in a feud with the Big Show, when after attacking him, Big Show would ultimately be the person to unmask CM Punk, and we would finally get to see him bald. And not too shortly after that, Big Show would also be the person to reveal the identity of the Masked Man that was still with the Straight Edge Society at the time. And it was none other than Joey Mercury, who the WWE audience hadn't seen in, well, since he got his nose broken into a million pieces by Jeff Hardy. So naturally, it was quite a shock to have him back in the company. The members of the Straight Edge Society would challenge Big Show at SummerSlam 2010 in a 3-on-1 handicap match, but they could not overcome the Big Show that night, and this was another big loss to the Straight Edge Society. Finally, after months and months of losing, CM Punk was starting to have a disdain for the group. And not too long after this, Serena was released from her WWE contract because she apparently wasn't too committed to the gimmick while she was out and about in public. Joey Mercury suffered a torn pec at the same time and had to get surgery before moving down to FCW to become a trainer and eventually become a backstage producer for WWE. So that only left Luke Gallows and CM Punk as the remaining members of the Straight Edge Society. Punk would finally have enough of the Straight Edge Society losing time and time again. When he and Luke Gallows lost a handicap match to the Big Show, this would be the breaking point for CM Punk, as he would turn on Luke Gallows and hit him with a GTS after the match, which would ultimately lead to a match between the two themselves. And Gallows told Punk when he wins that he was going to celebrate with a nice cold beer. But he would have to wait a while for that beer because Punk ended up picking up the win. Gallows would get released not too long after that, and that was the end of the Straight Edge Society. Looking back on the Straight Edge Society, it was quite a refreshing take at the time. I mean, it was a great heel faction, almost like a Right to Censor 2.0. And they had a believable message that they wanted to shove down our throats, which made us hate them even more. However, if we're talking about the group in terms of kayfabe, they sucked at their jobs because out of all the time that they were a group and spreading their message, they only managed to have one person join their group in the form of Joey Mercury. And I mean, sure, you think about it, those people who were volunteering, of course they were plants, and they never really joined the group long term anyway. I hear people say all the time that they were very short-lived, and I honestly think that they lasted pretty much the perfect amount of time, because you don't want a group to last too long because it's gonna eventually get stale. You only need to look at the NWO when I'm making that statement. But the Straight Edge Society was a pretty underrated faction in my opinion, and they do deserve to go down as one of the best factions in the modern era.